Change lives.
cambiar vidas,
Change lives.
change organizations,
改变世界
change organization,
Change
दुनिया में बदलाव.
organizations.
Change the world.
There needs to be a popular media network in the US that represents the views and values of moderate conservatives. Fiscally conservative, but socially liberal and tolerant. And there's three reasons for this need. First, without this voice, slightly right of center, there will be a gap along the spectrum of views and political representation, an incomplete democracy. Second, this gap is polarizing, and that's not a good thing. And third, given the state of journalism today, where media businesses pursue ratings and profits, sometimes good journalism is subordinated, is put second place, and this makes the polarization worse. Now, this is important to me because news media has influenced me. When I was growing up in the US, since I was 13 actually, my parents were usually out of town for months at a time. And it was my neighbors that took care of me. And they were a wonderful couple. There was this lady called Flo, Fiery. She was the cleaner at a local cinemas. She was also a passionate union leader of those cleaners. Then there was her husband, Ray. He was your typical salt-of-the-earth Australian from the rural outback. Traditional, conservative. And even though it's been nearly 20 years, I remember one of his lessons very fondly. He told me, Dino, if you're in a fight and the other man goes down, that's it, the fight's over. There's no putting in the boot to a man on the ground. I really cherished my time with Flo and Ray. We used to sit down for dinner and we would watch the nightly news. Usually we'd watch a few channels for different perspectives. And I really enjoyed the open debate that we had. I mean, Flo would have her views. She was a union leader. Ray would have his views. Sometimes they were opposed, and strongly so, but I really respected the openness of debate. I really cherished that, we were all willing to be tolerant and listen to the other side. And over the years of having dinner with Flo and Ray, over the nightly news, that was how a lot of my beliefs and values were built up. And coming back now here to the US, when I watch the media channels available here, I can't help but think how my debate with Flo and Ray would have been influenced if that voice coming out of that TV box was a strong, hardline position. I can't help but wonder how my beliefs and values now would have been influenced. Now this matters to me because when I came here to the US 6 months ago, I was very excited. I was coming to the premier democracy in the world. And let's face it, whatever the US does, be it in trade, capital markets, or that big stick, the military, it matters to the rest of the world. And I was excited to be here. But when I came here, I don't know if it was just watching too much West Wing, but I saw something very different. I saw two camps polarized at opposite ends of the political spectrum. And I couldn't help but think, what role did news media play in this polarization? I asked my classmates, what media sources do you go to for your news, for your political views? And they mapped it out to me. They said, all right, Dino, if you want the conservative view, you go and watch Fox. You listen to Rush Limbaugh. I said, okay. And they kind of tell me, right, as you head towards center, you'll come across Wall Street Journal. Okay, it's a newspaper, and it's mainly financial. They don't really have a social platform. Then you have to go quite some way, before you come across, I say, National Public Radio. Then there's also the Public Broadcasting Service. I've been told they're quite neutral, mainly educational, but sometimes a little bit of liberal bias does sneak in there. Then you come across a CNN and the other major news networks. They describe ABC and CBS. And kind of out here, towards the liberal end of the spectrum, They pointed out there's MSNBC. Now, I mentioned that there's a gap, and this is the gap that I'm talking about. Because what's here right now, there's a diaspora of blogs, of internet sites. I mean, yes, there's sources, but there's no one unifying voice. And this lack of a strong voice in this space here, in this gap, that almost is reflected in a lack of political representation here. And this gap becomes polarizing. I have reached out to a lot of campus conservatives to try and better understand the political space in the US. And there were two stories that really stuck out for me. One was a Republican, and he described to me his pain in the last election. He said, Dino, my choices were the McCain-Palin ticket or Obama. And despite being a Republican, he couldn't bring himself to vote for the candidates that his party had put up. He felt that McCain-Palin just simply didn't represent the values that he believed in. He called himself a liberal Republican, and he ended up voting for Obama. There was another campus conservative. He was actually part of the original Tea Party movement. He was very excited as he described it. He said, we were out there in the town hall meetings reading the Constitution. It was almost like a pure intellectual movement about small government, about getting back to basics, about the individual rights. But what happened? You had Fox News Network pick up the coverage, picking up this movement. Then you had Sarah Palin come in. The movement became popular, and it shifted out to the right. And this campus conservative told me, I could no longer associate myself with this movement. It felt that this movement has shifted out to a hardcore fiscal conservative position, into a socially conservative position. And he felt that it almost became anti-intellectual. And this is what's happening here. People here, in this space, people here are being pushed out. You either have to go right or you have to go left, because there's no representation here. And that's not a good thing. To add to this polarization, there's this combination of sensationalism, of poor journalism, and almost a repetition that comes with the 24-hour news format. This combination has the potential to make the polarization worse. In fact, I say it makes the polarization worse. Let's think about sensationalism. What do we have here? When I started watching some of the more popular Fox shows, I was surprised at the examples of liberals that they were bringing into their shows. I almost thought that they were almost the worst examples of liberals to represent the other side. I remember this one person on the Hannity show, a Michael Crook. Now this guy believed that it was good US soldiers were getting killed because they were getting paid too much. Hannity grilled him into the ground, as you can imagine. But what is this sensationalism doing? It makes the Fox viewer here much easier to see the other side as, oh my God, you are crazy. You are unpatriotic liberals. Get away from him. And the same thing happens on this side. I've seen the comedy shows, Jon Stewart, Colbert. They pick the worst examples to come out of Fox to make fun of them. And it becomes so easy to attach that label. Geez, you guys are dumb. You guys are rednecks. So this sensationalism just pushes this polarization to a new level. Then there's the repetition. The repetition of the 24-hour news format. There's obviously not 24 hours worth of content there. So what ends up happening is this same content gets repeated again and again. And as advertisers will tell you, what happens when you repeat something again and again? What happens when you repeat the same image again and again? The same sound again and again? Well, some of that stuff gets burned into your subconscious. And I can't help but wonder what influence does the current media format now have on us that we're not even aware of. And lastly, poor journalism. And this is, unfortunately, I think, everywhere now. Recently, you had MSNBC try to link Mitt Romney to the Ku Klux Klan. They just lifted that out of a blog, unverified, and reported it as news. What is that? that just gives this side ammunition to clearly point the finger and say, how biased are you? And the reverse is true as well. As Fox chops and changes Obama's quotes to create something entirely new, again, makes it so much easier for the people here to point that finger and say, Fox, how biased are you? So this combination of sensationalism, of poor journalism, of repetition, this is almost like a nasty cocktail. And if you drink too much of this stuff, I say you start becoming intolerant. So now is the moment of truth. I will one day leave the US and go back to Australia. But before I do that, I do want to leave my mark here. I do want to share my cherished lessons from Flo and Ray, those lessons of tolerance, of hearing the other side, by creating a new voice that fills this gap, this current need, a voice that brings and improves the polarization, a voice that shows good journalism still has a place in the media business. Now, I was actually invited by Anne Grimes, she's the director of the graduate program in journalism, to attend a media entrepreneurship course she's running in this spring, and to try and breathe life into this dream. But I can't do it alone. And this is my ask. I'm looking for three people who share this passion and want to try and create something new in this special space. In this special place, they can bring out a tolerant voice that's not too far from either side of this political spectrum. And for those of you here who aren't students, we will be needing advisors. So if you share this passion, please, I would love to hear your insights. Please drop me that business card. And with that, I thank you.